I woke up the next day and the headlines were Kirthiga Reddy steps down because of free basics.
Oh my God.
All right. It was a confluence of everything that I wanted to do on the community side and what I would want to do on my job. And so again, I was so grateful and thrilled and excited when I got the call saying, we would love to offer you the role to build Facebook in India. In the early part of my career, Radhika, I used to say, what glass ceiling? It doesn't exist. That's what I used to think. Okay. But then actually, as I got senior and I started seeing the dwindling numbers of female role models around me, and often being the only woman in the room, it hits you pretty hard. My mother is wiser, smarter than I ever will be. She did not have the opportunity, as you mentioned, to finish her high school education because her parents said, Beti, you only need enough math to do the grocery bill, right? For me, one of the goosebump moments was earlier last year.
Thanks, Kirthiga, for joining in today for our show, Wiping Out the Norm. You've clearly been a woman of many firsts, and I'm sure that you're leading still by example now with your startup, Virtualness. But tell me that, the news and the media and everyone around you has defined you as one of the most powerful and influential businesswomen so far, So I wanted to ask you as to what's your definition of power and what does influence really mean to you to start things off?
It's a great question. And I think for me, power and influence really is about how one uses that platform to uplift people, to speak for the causes that matter to you. And it's fascinating how some people, hesitate in quote unquote giving their power away. And I have found that giving your power away actually multiplies your power. And so I think of the many cases where I was able to make a win-win introduction that I was uniquely able to make, where I was able to use my platform to advocate for the cause of more female founders, Black founders. And that to me is what power and influence is all about, Radhika.
Yeah. And has this definition really changed from the time that you were in your 20s building your career to now? I want to know that transition. How did it happen?
100%. When I was, actually someone asked me when I was first listed in these, top 25 women in power list. I went back to the office and, we have a Friday session, just like, Mark Zuckerberg does a Friday Q&A at headquarters. Most of the offices across the globe do Friday sessions with their, their MDs, their head of the country as well. And so someone asked me, it was Kalpana Behra, I still remember who it was. She said, was this your plan all along where you felt that you were going to do A, B, C, and your goal was to end up in, this magazine cover and be on this list of top 25 businesswomen? And I looked at her and I said, of course. And by the way, if anyone listening to that believes me, okay, you will believe anything because the real answer is no to all of that. When I grew up in a very ordinary, I would say, middle class, lower middle class family. And my entire goal was, how is it that I get a good education? How is it that I get a good job? That was success.
Right.
And then slowly over time, Radhika, I do think that both my vision got bigger, broader, more long term. And even at that time, when this, I was listed for the first time in these top women in power, if you had asked me my definition of power,
10
that
years
would
back
have been very different than what I think of my power. So I think what will be fascinating to see is how this definition continues to
Correct.
evolve.
Yeah. For the next 30-40 years.
How do you define power?
Me, I think it's all about creating an influence within yourself, for yourself. I think we're living today in a world of inner poverty. Poverty is, of course, there outside, but what about us? We are deprived of our own thoughts and feelings. We're just not aware or conscious about ourselves. So I think that is power to me, when I can realize what I am made for, what's my purpose. And because I think if I know myself, I can empower others also.
I love that definition. And it reminds me actually of my daughter, who she was in her 9th grade when she was asked to write an essay of who inspires you. And her answer was, I seek inspiration within me.
Wow.
Like, okay,
at that age. People learn this at 80s, 70s.
I know. Totally, right? It's one of those, someone said, when you're in the 20s, you're all worried about what everyone else thinks of you. When you're 40, you say, I'm going to stop worrying about what everyone thinks of me. And when you're 60, you realize that no one thought of you anyways, So just get through that realization and just be who you are. And I'm telling you, everyone has more power than they think is possible. And so a big message that I constantly remind myself and tell people around me is that your voice has more power than you think is possible. So use your voice. Use your voice for things that matter to you.
Yeah, that's so right. You spoke about your childhood. I read in one of your articles that your mom didn't study for graduation, but you have done your post-graduation, and now we're seeing the generational shift, like you said about your daughter. She's way ahead in terms of her thoughts. But tell me, how was it to, rise up in that kind of an environment where your mother hadn't seen so much, but she empowered you to see the world and do whatever you wanted to?
So Radhika, my mother is wiser, smarter than I ever will be. She did not have the opportunity, as you mentioned, to finish her high school education because her parents said, Beti, you only need enough maths to do the grocery bill, right? And by the way, her brother did a postgraduate education. So it was very clearly a gender divide. It wasn't that they didn't know the value of education. And truly, then I think about her pride as she sees me in these, top women in power list, that it makes me reflect on the change that one generation can make. And one, gives me a whole sense of optimism, but two, also gives me a huge sense of responsibility about what I need to do to make this world that much of a better place. And Radhika, for me, one of the goosebump moments was when earlier last year, I rang the opening bell for as part of the management team of Athena Tech 2. We were the first all-female, all-immigrant management team to ring the opening bell at New York Stock Exchange. My mother joined us over Zoom. And so here we are, my mom, who did not finish her high school education, she is there along with her daughter and her grandchildren, who are also on the podium. And it was truly a surreal moment and one of the proudest moments.
It actually gives me goosebumps while listening to that. I would like to see that picture after the show.
Yep, totally.
How did you decide that you would want to go to abroad to study further? Why not just explore in India, because that's one triggering point that it really takes to make that shift. And it's not easy to go leaving your parents into another country, although now it's very much possible with so many people doing it. But how was it back then?
So I will be honest and say that my journey to engineering was one that was driven more by societal norms, where, in India, especially when I was growing up, the norm was, if you're good in math and science and we wanted to be successful, you either, I was told by my teachers, Kirthiga, you have many options, right? You can either be an engineer, a doctor, or a total failure, right? So those were the three choices I had to pick from. And I actually gave my entrance exam for both, got into engineering. And so engineering is, I would say, what society took me to. But I actually fell in love with engineering as well. And I found it magical to look at a problem statement, apply technology and find a solution to it. And to be able to think then about the scaled impact of that. And so the next decision to apply for a master's was a conscious one. And I went and I told my parents that I want to do my further education. And I think part of the again, to be honest, the international conversation was, it just felt like such an ultra, I would say, competitive space in India with only very few opportunities for very few people. And the US felt much more welcoming with their opportunities. And also, the level of sophistication, the level of specialization in kind of the courses that were being done. And, of course, the appeal of international. And so that's what I told my parents. And my father beamed and said, Kirthiga, I'm so proud of you. You will be the first person in the family to go abroad. We will figure out how to get a loan, how to finance your education. My mother beamed and said, you get married and then you do whatever you want. And so that was what started the process of finding the perfect groom. And I met my then fiancé, now husband, on August 1st. We were engaged on August 4th. So we were engaged. We were allowed to go for one chaperone dinner, at the end of which we were supposed to come back and tell our parents if we wanted to get married to each other or not. And next year we celebrate our 30th anniversary. So I feel very grateful that in that process I found my soulmate and companion, who truly has been someone who believes in me more than I believe in myself. He's like more than the 50-50 parent. I would not be here having this conversation if not for his support.
It's so nice to hear when people acknowledge other people who came into their life later on and gave all the support to be able to become what you are now.
Well, so my quick life lessons, since we're at this point. Okay, so one, if you are one single listening to this, and if you're looking for your partner, and by the way, you don't necessarily need a partner. If you don't need a partner, you don't need a partner. But if you're looking for your partner, know that the partner that you choose will be the most important career decision that you make. Not the industry, not your manager, but the partner that you choose will be your most important career decision. That's one. Two, as you're thinking about whether you have children, not have children, again, if you want to have children, not, it's again a personal choice. We waited a really long time and we delayed for the smallest reasons. I have to go to a wedding, I can't be pregnant, and then we realized that when we were ready, things just don't happen because you are ready. And actually both my girls were both through fertility treatment, so both of them were IVF induced babies. So I feel very grateful for technology, for the gift of motherhood. And my takeaway from that is, one, there never will be a perfect time to have kids. And so if you really want to have kids, it's always a perfect time, is a corollary of that. And so, have them and the universe conspires to make it happen. And my last advice is, when you have children, nothing will stress your multitasking abilities as much. And there I stumbled into a superpower that I want to give everyone, which is a superpower of the and. Versus the tyranny of the or. Very often things are presented to you as choices. Do this or that. And while not all the time you can make it into an and, very often, if you just think outside the box, there's a possible and in it. And so, for example, I wanted to nurse my younger one for the full year, just as I did for the first one. Again, a personal choice. Everyone can make different choices. I was working at that time. And actually, my first child was born a year into business school, and that was the best time to have kids. She had 365 aunts and uncles, and she was totally pampered. But when my second one was born, I was in product management, and I needed to travel. And it really got to me where I said, oh my God, is this what people talk about when they say you have to make a choice between your personal and your professional lives? But then one day it struck me, as I was having these sleepless nights, I don't have to. So for the first year, I actually traveled with her. And everywhere I went, some arrangement came together to take care of her. And it's unbelievable how once you make a decision to do something, nature conspires to make things happen for you. And so think about the superpower of the and versus the tyranny of the or. And I'm not saying make the same decisions I do, but really think about whether choices that are presented as an or can be an and.
But tell me as to how did, coming to Facebook now, how did it all start? Why did you choose to apply to that interview process? I'm sure since you were the first employee for Facebook in India, it must be very grilling for you and drilling as well as to how should they be hiring you to represent India at a global level. So tell me about that journey of yours. How did it start?
Yeah, so, I came to India, as I mentioned, with Motorola, with my 2 girls and my wonderfully supportive husband. My girls were 3 and 5 at that time.
Yeah.
We thought, actually coming back to India, and this goes back to your early question of, Kirthiga, why did you go to the US for your master's, right? I think we went there to our master's, and through my work, I had to come back to India every quarter, and I could see how much India was opening up and how much India was changing, and India was clearly on the growth trajectory. And I kept thinking to myself, we went to the United States for those opportunities and learning, but there is so much opportunity right here in this country. And so when the opportunity came up to lead the good division in India, I raised my hand. Again, brutal interview process.
How did the opportunity come in though?
So, Good Technology had acquired a company that had a presence in India, in Hyderabad. And so when we were acquired by Motorola, there was a general manager who was running the division. She finished her 1.5-year assignment. And so they were looking for a new person to take on that role.
Okay.
And it was something that was on my mind for the longest time, is that if there is the right opportunity, that I would love to come back to India. And this felt perfect because it was a company that I love, a product that I love, people that I love. And it was a shift in the country. And so that was how that came about. And as I said, it was an interview process. And I was thrilled to get the role. I also then called my mom and I said, my husband got a 6-month relocation, so I was going to come first with the girls and then he would follow me. So I called my parents and I said, I'm going to come with the girls. If you are able to come and help me with the girls, then I can do this. If not, I don't know whether I'll be able to do it. And God bless my parents. They said, sure. And so they were actually with me in Hyderabad for 6 months, helping me through that transition. And so that's how that one came about. And so through that process, we said, we'll go back 1.5 years and we will figure out what's next for us. But through that time, really just loved being back in India. And wanted to play a part in the nation building that was happening at that time. It was just at the start of the internet. So reached out, made my list of companies that I would love to work for, and Facebook was pretty high there. I got an introduction to Sheryl Sandberg through a business school classmate who had worked for Google with her, now was with Facebook with her, Prashant Fuloria. And so, went to the US to meet with Facebook and with a few other companies on my list. And at that time, we explored a few different roles with Facebook, and we said, let's keep in touch for the right role. And it was almost a year later that Facebook announced its intention to open its office in India. So I picked back up on the conversation. And as you said, the interview process was brutal. I think I met with maybe like 14 people, and maybe most of that like in one day.
Oh my God.
And so, there were 2 or 3 conversations before. And then went to headquarters, and there was, maybe I met with 12 people. I met with everyone from HR and finance and legal, and the operations team.
All of these team members were from the US?
Were from the US.
Okay.
Yes. And I will say with each conversation, I actually fell more in love with the opportunity. And I remember my conversation with Debbie Frost, who ran communications, where she asked me, she said, Kirthiga, Facebook had just integrated with the Amber Alert system in Canada and the US then, such that if a child goes missing, you can broadcast on Facebook, and there's all kinds of data research that you can find children that much faster. And so she said, what will you do in India using the power of the platform? And for me, that moment, it suddenly, this was much more than just a job and a career. It was a confluence of everything that I wanted to do on the community side and what I would want to do on my job. And so again, I was so grateful and thrilled and excited when I got the call saying, we would love to offer you the role to build Facebook in India.
Wow. I mean, I can just imagine all of this taking place and how much of thrill it would have given you
Yeah.
to be able to do that. But what were some of the other questions from the interview that you remember till date that, okay, this was what I was asked, and probably because of that answer, I'm here today?
So I'll tell you, Facebook, like most multinational companies, is structured as functional reporting. So at any one point of time, the functions that I directly managed in India would directly report into me. But let's say the head of growth would report into the person who leads growth regionally and globally. Policy, similarly. HR, similarly. Finance, similarly. But you still have to have a very cohesive voice as a team in the region. So one of the first questions Cheryl asked me was, Kirthiga, how do you lead in an environment where you have a lot of responsibility, but not the reporting structure authority, right? And I think that's a really important question, and something that a lot of companies, especially MNCs, grapple with. And a lot of people go back and forth between local reporting, global reporting, and different things are right for different reasons. And so my answer then, by the way, was to talk about one, making sure we invest in having a shared vision across the company. Two is, communication, and you could just keep going there. And making sure that there are very strong strategies and tactics to deliver, and a lot of celebration along the way, actually deliver on these milestones.
Tell me your journey from being into operations and joining that team in Facebook to rising up and becoming the managing director for India. How did that happen, and at what stages did you encounter different challenges that you faced with a lot of courage and that sense of ownership that, okay, it's mine and I will take it up, and that's the reason why probably you rose up to this level. So how did that happen? If you could tell us little nitty-gritties of it.
Sure. So I started as the first employee for Facebook in India, and they're head of online operations, because operations is what the initial charter was. This cross-functional team, we came together, and to the learning of, let's make sure we have a joint vision. The team in India used to have responsibilities at a global level, because we used to have one of the 4 global operations offices that serves, there are now 3.5 billion users, is in India. So we had a global charter. And then Asia Pacific small medium business revenue was run out of India at that time. And then there was an India specific goal as well. So on the India specific side, the team, because it was very much a cross-functional team, came up with this goal of 100, 100, 100. Take a guess. What do you think those 3 hundreds are?
Revenue.
Okay.
Then probably 100-year vision statement, like SoftBank used to have for 300 years. And the other 100 could be employees तो हो ही गया होगा 100 crores, है ना?
So it was actually 100 million people on the platform.
Okay.
And at that point, we didn't even have 100 million people on the internet, right? And so 100 million people on the platform.
How many were there on the internet?
Well, when we started, we had 8 million people on Facebook, and we had sub 100 million on the internet in India for a country of 1.3 billion people. And by the way, we're not talking about decades and decades. This is about like 13 years ago. And to imagine how much has changed with, India alone having over 600 million people. There was no WhatsApp, as dominant as it was. Insta hadn't launched here. There was no TikTok. There's no Snap. I mean, imagine how much has changed in the last 12 years. And Threads crossed 100 million users just last week, right? And so I think that's also foretelling of how much will change in the next 10 years, and something that we all need to get ahead of. But yeah, so that was a goal that we set. And on your question of what was the nitty-gritty behind that growth, so 100 was our 4-year vision. It was a BHAG of all sorts, a big, hairy, audacious goal. But give or take 1 or 2 quarters, we hit each one of those in that 4-year mark. Huge cross-functional effort there to make that happen. And over the course of that time, as India started growing bigger, we also decided then to invest in our sales efforts in India, which was when I raised my hand to say I would like to lead sales. And I never really run sales before. And I'm very grateful that Facebook has this philosophy of we will hire athletes and then, prioritizing that versus strictly domain skills. But in doing so, I was also with people who had only done sales for the last 20, 30 years. So having to go back to that, let's make sure I really understand what it means to do forecasting, tracking, relationships, account management. And it was interesting. Like I had asked Cheryl for her advice, I then asked Carolyn Everson, who was leading global sales, a phenomenal leader. She's now on the board of Under Armour, Disney, Coca-Cola, phenomenal, and an investor in Virtualness. And so I asked her, what's your advice for me? What should I do as this sales leader? And she said, Kirthiga, what I want you to do is to know that it was the strengths that you bring that made you right for this role. So your ability to really put yourself in the client's shoes, understand their problem, take that and understand how technology can be applied to solve that problem, and the relationship building skills that you have. That is what made you right for this. So make sure as you think about all the gaps that you have, that you don't forget the strengths that you bring to this role, which was actually a very important point to me as I was thinking about, oh my God, I have to learn so much. But, all of that said, there was a big learning curve as well in making sure I understand what it takes to really be a very strong sales leader. And we went on to build business that was several $100 million in revenue, and got buy-in for additional resource investment on the vision of getting to $1 billion in revenue. The team does over $2 billion in revenue now. Kudos to the team. So those were all important inflection points from starting as the first employee for Facebook in India, leading their operations in Hyderabad, and then coming to Mumbai, and our first offices were exactly where we were sitting in 1 BKC. We had a business center first, and then we moved into a bigger space. And each of the offices, by the way, has our values very prominently displayed, going back to hire the right people, build the right culture, and business results will come. Every of the Facebook offices, when I was here, and I cut the ribbon for about 7 offices in my time here, all had values very prominently.
You should visit the India office now.
I did.
It's so nicely made out.
Awesome. It is awesome.
But how did you receive the announcement of becoming a managing director? I want to know that experience of yours.
I would say that one was more almost like gradual and natural. Because it was just, I was the head of online operations when I started, and as I took on the sales role, it was almost something that was the natural role and title for the expanding responsibilities, if you may. And it was a meaningful moment, but I would say it was part of the journey, and I would point to things like the first time the online operations office came and started working, and we saw the turnaround times on the queries go down. I would call that as a highlight moment that I still remember. Of course, the milestones driven by our user growth team that reported in globally when we hit 100 million users in the company. Or when we hit 1 billion users, when we did the Facebook IPO. And by the way, if you remember, the stocks were punished because we didn't have a mobile strategy. And to work through that transition where we said, stay focused, keep shipping. I would remember some of those moments more, Radhika, than the title per se.
Yeah. No, I asked that more because my next question was along your leadership style,
Yeah.
How has it evolved from the time when you worked at Silicon Graphics, pre-MBA, and till the time that you were heading Facebook India's office?
So the biggest pivot to me is that focus on culture, focus on hiring people, and results will come. That is probably, I would say, the biggest shift. That's one. And two, truly the power of grassroots feedback and internalizing the feedback is a gift. We really invested. When we talk about building culture, it was along the 5 values of Facebook, be bold, focus on impact, be open, build social impact, move fast. And so each of these, actually, we spent a lot of time, one, understanding, and two, making sure that we are building it into our behaviors. So for example, if I just take one, be open, right? We had many conversations about what does be open mean? Like, what does be open mean to you?
Open to feedback, mostly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating as we talk to people, there were different interpretation. One was how open, you are with data, how transparent are things about, decisions being made.
Yeah.
And of course, the whole feedback aspect as well. So it started with having discussions. That's one. Two, my HR partner said, with India being such a hierarchical culture, it's going to be very difficult to build a be open culture. And we took that as a challenge. So we actually did coaching on constructive criticism, on how one could deliver constructive feedback. We used to do feed forward sessions, which is a little bit like speed dating, where you sit in a room. See, the minute I said speed dating, everyone's ears perked up. But, but this is one where you sit in a room and you go around and you say, this is one thing that you did well, and these are 2 things that you can do better. Just to make it a norm and to make it not a big deal of giving feedback, because people put so much weight. Oh, if I give feedback, will that ruin my relationship, etc. Whereas it's actually the opposite. The kindest thing you can do for a person is to actually, give them feedback of how they could do things differently and how they could do things better. And so we really, really invested in each of those cultural tenets to build the culture that we want. I would say that is the biggest shift. The focus on people and the focus on culture as a way to driving results and performance is the biggest shift. And by the way, sometimes people ask the question where they say, what might be the most, maybe the word maybe misunderstood, might not be the wrong word, but what might people not get right about you? And I often say, people might think that one, I'm softer on the impact, on the results, but think again, for me, they're all part of a package. I just view that investment on people and culture as the way to performance, but I'm all about high performance. And that's at the heart of what we're doing as well.
That gets discussed more in the boardrooms than in the podcast shows, maybe. And how much results matter.
100% results matter. I mean, and when I say that, one, people are at the core of my belief set and what matters most to me. And that investment in people and culture should result in performance. If it doesn't, it probably means that those people actually will thrive more in a different place with a different culture. And so again, the kindest thing then is to make sure that they are each at places where they can thrive. So that is, to me, where those 3 pillars come together.
We all know that you are someone who likes to never settle and always get out of your comfort zone and do different things. That is one more reason that you stepped down from Facebook for discovering more opportunities. I'd like to know more about why was that decision incoming for you at that point in time in your life.
So 6 incredible years at Facebook in India, and then we relocated back when my girls were starting high school and middle school. We said as much fun as we were having in India, if we ever had to go back, that was the right time to go back. And so
why did you have to go back?
You know, I think part of it is just preferences between like my husband, his profession, and where he would thrive. And I come from the school of thought that I feel very grateful to have two countries to call home. When I land in India, I feel I'm home. When I land in the US, I feel I'm home. And I knew I would thrive in either locations. So it just, if you optimize for preferences across the family, it made sense for us to go back to the United States. And then that timing with the girls starting high school and middle school was also the trigger for us. So I told Facebook probably a year ago, saying that this is what is coming up. And we had a very strong transition plan where we did extensive search to bring on the right successor. And then I started thinking about what I want to do next. And spoke to a number of people, a number of functions at Facebook in headquarters. And essentially went back to Carolyn Everson, who ran sales, who I mentioned is an incredible leader, and said, I don't think we're spending enough of a focus on emerging markets with our top global advertisers. I would love to play a role in building that focus out. And once again, I was very grateful to Facebook for saying, go ahead and, make sense. So I put together a business plan for what that would look like. And was grateful to have the backing to go do that. So I joined the global partnerships team to build that emerging markets focus, and also led our global partnerships for the fintech vertical. So work with clients like Visa, who also I think they have, I think I visited the Visa India offices as well when I was here. And spent 2 incredible years with Facebook in headquarters doing that. At the end of that, 2 things happened. One, I just started missing the startup ecosystem. Right? The building, the growing, the scaling was something that I kept thinking about. And 2, I actually heard at one of the Facebook conferences this stat where they were talking about augmented reality, virtual reality. And they said, in the United States, 95% of your FaceTime with your child is done by the time they go to college. And hence, you need augmented reality, virtual reality. Okay. Now, my heart stopped at the first part of that sentence because I had 2 more years for my oldest daughter to go to college. So I started waking up to that stat and started thinking, oh my God, 1 day less, 1 day less, 1 day less. And those 2 things together made me decide to say, okay, I am going to take a 3-month all life, no work break and spend time with my kids before they're all off. That was when I did my second Everest base camp trek, actually with my oldest daughter, and we made memories for a lifetime. And I will tell you, Radhika, I had the best well-wishers tell me, do not do this. Like, do not just leave and take a break and then figure out what's next. Find another job. Otherwise, you're going to lose all of your negotiating leverage. To which I said, 1, I don't think I'm going to lose all of my career highs. But even if I do, I'd much rather look back and look back at having missed that career high versus look back and having regret not spending time with my kids. And I will tell you that it was that break that gave me the space to think, to explore. When I left Facebook, I thought I would go be a CEO of an early stage startup. But that space gave me the time, as I said, to meet fascinating people, including in the venture industry. And with some of them, we started exploring the opportunity to invest full time with them. And that led me to SoftBank. And I would not have done that if I just went from one job to another. When I graduated from Stanford Business School, before that, I was the director of engineering in a 9,000 people, $2 billion, highly profitable company. And I went from there to being an individual product manager in an early stage startup in the mobile space. one would imagine that one graduates from one of the best business schools in the world, gets a pay raise, a title raise, and here I was stepping back in my titles. I also took a 40% pay cut because when you go to a startup, the payout is more in the equity versus the compensation. I remember lots of debates if this is the right path, because I could have done more linear paths. I spoke to Jana Rich, who now runs Rich Consulting Talent Group, where, and that time she was, I think, with Korn Ferry. And I said, is this going to look really bad on my resume? Where I was the director of engineering and then my MBA and then individual product manager. What she told me was, Kirthiga, if this is a short-term move, then it's probably the wrong thing. But if this is a function that you really want, a company that you really like, a space that you want to be in, and you want to be in here for the long term, then it's not the wrong move. It's something that will, all of what you've done before will pay off in what you're doing. And sure enough, so if you look at my LinkedIn resume, it's very easy to see Director of Engineering, Director of Product Management, but what you will miss is seeing, the individual contributor and the group product manager to go back up to the Director of Engineering. So people think things are linear, but when more often than not, these paths are non-linear. And if I hadn't taken those risks, I would have not been with Motorola. I might not have come to India. I might not have been the head of Facebook India.
Before we step into your journey at, SoftBank, I'd like to know if you ever got a chance to meet Mark and have a conversation. Mark Zuckerberg.
So yes, Mark is such a visionary. So Mark, of course, does Friday Q&A with the whole company. So the whole company gets to interact with him. He's also visited India a few times. And so I did work more with Cheryl than with Mark, given my role was on the sales and operations side. But Mark has been an instrumental person in my life. And I actually feel very fortunate to have worked with visionaries like Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook and then with Masa Son at SoftBank.
So at SoftBank, whom were you approached by and how did that happen? Was it on an email or a meeting over coffee or what?
So I was talking to SoftBank. As I mentioned, I thought I was going to go be a CEO of an early stage startup. So I was talking to different venture funds about their portfolio companies. And a few of the venture firms asked me whether I would consider investing full-time with them. And by the way, after I left Facebook, I'd also started my own seed fund called F7 with 6 other female executives who we all met at Facebook.
That's a nice name.
Already F7, right? So I'd already tiptoed my way into the investing side. And so the specific person that I was having a conversation with is another key mentor, instrumental in my career and journey, is Deep Nishar, who was the senior managing partner at SoftBank, formerly the chief product officer of LinkedIn. So it's someone I'd known for about a decade. I never really worked for him. But when I started having that conversation, a lot of decisions at this stage become about the person and the people that you work with. And the opportunity to learn from Deep was very compelling. SoftBank was, of course, making very big, bold moves. And so to me, it was just the right next once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be with SoftBank.
Right. And before that, SoftBank never had a female partner, right? You were one of their first
I was their first female investment partner.
And was the interview process here also very tough?
So it was a very different interview process. I did meet with everyone in Deep's team. I met with the CEO of SoftBank Vision Fund. I met with the CHRO of SoftBank Vision Fund. And so it was very different in nature and flavor. And it was more around the future, trends, investing, versus how would you build a company, as you can imagine, given that it's an investment firm. And again, that was yet another, for me, once in a lifetime opportunity and another trajectory changer in my career.
I really want to know, how did this name Virtualness come up, and how did you hire your first set of team members, if you have some interesting stories to share there?
No, totally. So I all credit to my co-founder Saurabh for the name, and all of the brand colors, this design, huge credit to him. We divide and conquer our different spaces. So that's the name. And virtualness rhymes with happiness, awesomeness, and the world is going virtual. Everything that is physical now that can move to digital will move to digital. The next generation is spending more and more time in the digital world. I did a hackathon on Web3 for 6 to 16-year-olds. Radhika, 6 to 16-year-olds. And they are learning, how to create metaverse environments and how to create their digital good. So if that is what they're learning, that is the world. This is, sometimes people call it the Roblox generation or the Minecraft generation. They've all lived in digital worlds. So it's a reflection of where the world is going.
Virtualness is like a feeling, an emotion. I feel like that.
Totally, totally, right? So that's the genesis of the name. In terms of our early team, we got really lucky with the blockchain winter, if you may, in that our core team, actually, people have worked together for over 5 years on the engineering side. They'd seen a fintech exit before in a company that all started to work on a blockchain company. Given the market environment, they said, probably not the right time to do it. I knew the CEO, Satyan Kothari, really well, based in Mumbai, right now in Spain. And it's one of those things that you cannot dream it. That we got really lucky that the timing worked out. I had a really good relationship with Satyan. We spoke to the really incredible talent in the team. And we have the most amazing blockchain architect, the most amazing front end, back end, Android, iOS engineers, and that's how our core engineering team came about. And from there we built to we are now a 22 plus people team across 4 countries, US, Singapore, India, and Dubai. And I'm heading out after this to Dubai for, it's a hybrid team, and we get the whole team together. We got them together in Mumbai in January. We're bringing them all together in Dubai in July.
I'm sure it'll be a great time for all of y'all, and we'll enjoy through the pictures you share on social media. But which set of departments did you create to begin with for your team members when you started the company?
So the first quote-unquote department, we are a very flat organization. This is a startup, so I wouldn't even say that there are departments even now. But the first set of people that we hired was engineering. And then, of course, we had a finance lead who came very quickly after that. And I would say we continued to grow the product team. And more recently, we hired our go-to-market teams. So Saurabh and I closed the first few creator deals ourselves. And then we have hired the most amazing head of creator and brand outreach, Rachel Masters. She comes to us from Warner Music Group, early employee at Ning, early employee at Mighty Networks. I mean, phenomenal, and has been at the intersection of creators, brands, community, technology. And then our go-to-market on the sports side. So, for example, we have an exclusive with the Philippines Basketball Association. Basketball is a religion in the Philippines, just like cricket is in India. Also closed with leagues and teams in Indonesia. So it was a product team, and within product engineering, design, front end, back end. We are on iOS, Android, mobile web. So we have a person or two in each of these different areas. Followed by the go-to-market teams.
And tell me about your investing journey into Virtualness. When did you get your first investor and the first check?
So I would say that the first was F7 Ventures. So the first incarnation of F7 Ventures, when was 7 of us got together, and created a seed fund with our own our own capital.
Yeah.
And then two of them, Joanna and Kelly, went on to do this full time and raise an institutional round.
Yeah.
And has the most amazing investors as part of this. Paris Hilton is an investor in F7. Sheryl Sandberg and Tom Bernthal are investors. SoftBank Group is an investor. I would say that they were the first people that I went to with the idea, and I said, Saurabh and I are planning to do this, and they said, if you do this, we want to be your first check in.
Okay.
And that was really an important, I would say, conversation, endorsement, and they continue to be, my first call for all the strategy, hiring related aspects. And soon after, we had Polygon Ventures. So our cap table, I get the goosebumps every time I think about my cap table. It has the most amazing creators. I'd say probably hand in hand, almost at the same time as F7, we were also reaching out to creators and talking about a business idea. So 𝒒𝒊𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒈 is an investor and an advisor. So when some of them, you talk to them about the idea and they say they want to invest, that's a really good sign, right? When your potential customers say that they want to invest. So I maybe they predated the F7, but maybe somewhere close, almost parallel. So we have the most amazing creators like 𝒒𝒊𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒈. Randy Zuckerberg is an investor. Marina Mogilko is another creator who just won the world's best influencer in education award. So again, amazing folks on the creator side. Amazing folks on the institutional side, like F7 Ventures. Blockchain Ventures was eventually our lead for our seed round. They are early into blockchain, and Kelog Day is my lead investment partner. Phenomenal. I mean, each of these people are true partners, founder first partners on the table. To people like Vaibhav from Better Capital here in India, Falcon X. I could go on about the institutional investors that we have, the creators that we have, and individuals. Preeta Sukantar is an investor. So I have a lot of founders on the cap table as well. Harsh Jain from Dream Level is an investor. Vani Kola is an investor. And I know Vani was here in the studio as well. So I'm sure there's overlap between the people who came here and people who are on my cap table. So the most amazing investors. What you're reminding me also is, I chaired the Stanford Business School Management Board. A lot of people ask me, so Kirthiga, like, how does one get into that role? Like, how does one get, it's such a important role for the school. And if I reflect back, Radhika, you know where it all started? It started with me raising my hand to be the alumni chapter chair in Bangalore when I was in Bangalore for Stanford Business School alumni. And while that might sound like a super fancy title, she was a chapter chair of Stanford Business School in Bangalore. What it really meant is making sure there was chips and soda for like 3 people who were our Stanford Business School alums, right? Because I had to get-togethers. There were about 7 people, and of 7 people, 3 people would show up. And at some point, I got frustrated with so much effort for like so little. So I used to start doing joint MBA mixers. And some of my best friends till today come from those joint business school mixers. But what happened is because of that role, when the Dean of Stanford Business School visited India, I got a chance to spend a lot of quality time with him. He eventually invited me to join the Stanford Business School board. And then a few years later, they asked me whether I would chair the Stanford Business School board. So when I was a chapter chair doing chips and soda, was I thinking of this is my master plan to become the chair of Stanford Business School Management Board? No. Right?
And how did, just because you mentioned about this, I'm curious to ask, how did that transition happen from being a board member to the chair of the board?
So that to me, I would say, you asked me, Kirthiga, how did you feel when you became the managing director? To me, there was the managing director was more an evolution of the things that I was already doing. But being invited to being the vice chair and the chair was a moment. Was a moment, right? Because also remember, I grew up, my engineering college was done in Nanded, right? And so getting into Stanford Business School itself felt like a dream come true. And then to be asked to chair the Stanford Business School Management Board. And I was the first Asian, I think, to chair the board. Was a moment, and it felt like a big recognition of doing exactly what I mentioned, is staying focused on what is it that I can bring to help the school with their goals, to help the dean with his goals, and things that I did with my fellow board members. It felt like a recognition of that, and it was a moment.
What do you think got the dean to invite you to the board when you had a conversation with him in India? And do you think that conversation, if that wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have ever happened?
I do think that if I hadn't already spoken with the dean and the dean did not know of my work, because a lot of time, later, of course, I've heard this being said in many forums, where it's about the best way to get into leadership positions in things like in schools is to already have, your track record of working with the school. And so there are, of course, times where you might get tapped into as they look for diverse set of experiences, and that might happen. But you certainly increase your probability if you're already out there doing things for the school and showing your commitment to the school and what you can do. Actually, I would contrast that with, I will say, Syracuse, which is my engineering alma mater. I was on the Dean's Leadership Council for over 6 years. And I just delivered the convocation speech for them last year, which was, again, an incredible honor. And so that one, they did reach out and say, we want to build a base in Silicon Valley. We want to establish deeper connects. We would love for you to be on the board. So that was another journey with the Dean's Leadership Council.
It also brings me to a question that what kind of a person are you in boardrooms for educational sector plus the investing sector and the companies that you work for, like WeWork, you said? How is it different in some way or the other?
The goals are very different, right? The goals are very different. They are the same in terms of keeping the broader mission in mind, and the same in terms of, asking. The biggest thing that you can do as a board is ask the right questions, right? And then be thinking about how is it that you can connect dots given your expertise to help accelerate the academic institution versus. So I've been on boards of academic institutions. I've been on boards of private companies, public companies, also of nonprofit organizations. I was an advisory board member for Teach for India, US. So there are certainly some things that remain the same. But the output of what is required in each one, whereas in an academic institution, there's things around academic excellence that is core. When it comes to a company, it's around the running of the company, shareholder value, that is most important. So there are different things, different hats that you need to wear in these different boards.
Coming to our question around the theme of the conversation, which is, unconscious gender bias, which unfortunately still exists because it's still unconscious there in our head. So having lived in different countries, meeting people of different cultures, have you ever experienced any gender bias coming your way in any part of your career so far?
In the early part of my career, Radhika, I used to say, what glass ceiling? It doesn't exist. That's what I used to think. Okay. But then actually, as I got senior and I started seeing the dwindling numbers of female role models around me, and often being the only woman in the room, it hits you pretty hard about the biases that exist. And certainly biases are there, and as you said, they're unconscious. Some specific examples that I will share is one in my investing role. I was introduced by the CEO as one of two partners who were making a decision on a particular deal. It was myself and another male partner. Now the other side was asking questions, and they would only address their question to
the male partner,
right? And so this was on an email thread. And so after this happened, not once, not twice, I actually wrote a note to this person and said, it's probably just an unconscious bias, but I would be doing a disservice. And by the way, doing a disservice has now become one of my favorite terms to use. So use it, feel free to steal it and use it. And said, I'm doing a disservice to this relationship if I didn't highlight that you have two decision makers on this thread. I'm a partner, investment partner as well, and both of us will be in that decision. Send a note. Now, of course, after that, and I was pretty new to the organization at that time, I started sweating. Oh my God, that person is also very senior. That probably is going to call up the CEO and said, who is this person? Why did she write a note to me like this? But I knew I just had to do it, right? Sure enough, a few hours later, I got a message back saying, thank you for highlighting this. My apologies, and I look forward to working with you.
Oh, nice.
And by the way, anytime after that, when I write to him, I get responses in 30 seconds.
Wow, that's the change you created.
Right? And so genuinely, I think a lot of this, the minute you understand that this is just systemic biases and it's not personal, it actually helps you deal with it better. And I think it's really important for all of us that, unfortunately, I mean, it sucks that there are these many unconscious biases, but the minute you realize that it's not personal, I think it helps you deal with it better. And each one of us do need to deal with it, because I think it makes it that much better for everyone else around us.
That's true. And detachment always helps.
Totally. Right? Totally.
Yeah. Without that, you would always think that it's always pointed towards you.
Yeah. And it sucks. But, read Deb Blue's Take Back Your Power for Women. It acknowledges the biases that exist. And while we wish the world was different and we should fight really hard to make it different, it also gives you tools and techniques to adapt in that kind of a environment. Yeah,
and anyone, men or women facing a bias, should not be hesitant to speak up. Like, you had the courage to write back to a senior man like that.
I totally. And I think the next generation does it that much better than we did. I mean, it took me these many years. I don't know whether 10 years ago I would have been able to do that. I would have just sulked and gone away, and I don't know what I would have done. But I do think that these days, of course, I feel if I don't say something, who will? So I make it a point to do that. And Radhika, I can't tell you how many times we had the dean of a medical school come give a talk, and he gave me his list of people who were bringing guests he were bringing, and they were all white men. And I wrote a note to him and I said, surely you must have some diverse faculty that you can bring as well. And he brought someone amazing, made her go first, and she was awesome. I've had the opportunity to do that, I would say almost on a weekly basis across my different roles. So each one of us will find those opportunities, and we'll all make the world a better place, one interaction at a time.
Yeah, that's so good to know. But with that, we come to a quick rapid fire round before we close the conversation.
All right.
Our show is titled as Wiping Out the Norm. So I would want to start by asking you of any instance where you think that you've wiped out the norm.
Oh my God, wiped out the norm. Certainly, if I reflect on our conversation, I think unconventional career choices is one, where I have not done the norm of what I would do after my MBA, what I would do after I was a successful director of engineering, and different milestones along the journey. So that's one. Two, I wouldn't say wiped out the norm, but I certainly hope that Dev and I model what a really important partnership can be in the and of having very ambitious professional goals as well as very ambitious personal goals. we see a 39% drop-off mid-career these days of women primarily for caregiving needs.
Yeah.
And if we see that kind of a drop-off mid-career, of course, some people come back, but we will never get to 50-50 if we see that. So I'd say that that's the second norm that I would like to call out. And I have my own social impact initiative called 𝒓𝒕𝒉. It was previously called Ladder, which is focused on the cause of working women. So the reason I need Virtualness to be a $10 million company is so that I can fund more social impact initiatives like 𝒓𝒕𝒉.
Wow, I'm sure it'll happen very soon.
Totally.
And I want to ask you that what cost have you paid to get this success? What went into it? I mean, there is some price that we pay materially or immaterially, to get to where we are. So I want to ask you, what was it for you?
It's such an important question. So I'd say two things. One, I'm actually picturing 𝒕𝒊𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈, who's my life coach, telling me, your sleep. Okay, so I don't sleep too much. I'm not proud of it.
How many hours do you sleep?
I'd probably average about 5 hours. But I'm not proud of it. And I'm working on it, okay? But there's so much exciting things to do. And I do try to catch up as well. And there are lots of things in my life that give me a lot of energy. Okay, so that's one. Two, I think the other price that I pay, given the story that I told you of my mom not having the opportunities, and I feel very conscious every moment about the opportunity, the responsibility, and so I think that responsibility stays with me all the time. And sometimes my girl asks me, is there any time that you just relax? And I think I could do better there as well. But I keep telling them, I said, listen, like when I'm here having this conversation with you, I'm going to walk out with more energy than I came in with. So, but I would say that I could do with some not taking that responsibility as though it all rests on my shoulders, because, it's all a community of us who are working to drive the change we want to see.
Yeah. Got it. Is there anything that you regret having not done? You said that there were many things that you did because you didn't have to live with that regret. But is there anything that's left that you could have done?
So, if I look back, one of my early regrets is that I had the opportunity to jump into entrepreneurship, even way back in my undergraduate journey, where my best friends, they all come from a hospital doctor setting, and they had said, can you develop like a hospital administration system for us and we'll pay you for it. But at that time, entrepreneurship was such a foreign concept. All that I knew was you should get a job. And I did not really engage in that conversation because I was not exposed to other things than get an education and get a job. That has always been a regret of mine then. And I would say, coming full circle back to Virtualness, like Facebook, by the way, was an entrepreneurial journey in itself, because it was the opportunity to be employee number 1 at Facebook in India. But then Virtualness is a different ball game, where it is, Saurabh and myself co-founding the company. So careers are long. We'll all live to be 80, 90, 100 and beyond, as I said. So it's an opportunity to always look back on all the things you didn't get done and to make sure you still do it.
Who would you call your mentor? Is it Sheryl Sandberg?
So Sheryl is an incredible mentor. So is Carolyn Everson, Deep Nishar. I would say that I find mentorship from across levels, across functions. Some of the people who are just right out of college. I used to come out from performance sessions every 6 months. We used to do our performance evaluations, and the level 1 individuals in the organization and what they were doing, I would say, oh my God, they inspire me more than maybe my peers. If they are doing all of that, then what should I be doing? And I'm also a big advocate of finding mentors for different aspects in your journey.
Just 3 stories. Firstly, on a challenging time at Facebook that you encountered.
I would say a challenging time was actually when I was relocating back from India to the United States. As I told you, we had told the company a year before, 6 months before we had started the process of hiring. At the same time, there was free basics happening in the country, which some of you may remember, may not remember, was very controversial in the company, and ultimately it was banned here. So we did not know when to announce my leaving, given all of what was happening on free basics. And ultimately, the free basic decisions came through. We felt we could not wait any longer. I posted on my Facebook page saying I'm relocating back and I'm going to have a 6-month transition. I woke up the next day and the headlines were Kirthiga Reddy steps down because of free basics.
Oh my God.
All right. So that was an interesting time to navigate those intersections. And I think, so at that moment, it felt hard. I think over time, the impact of what you have done and the accomplishments, they outlive and outlast.
Yeah.
And so at that time, it felt hard. But I think the corollary lesson is your impact, your legacy stays strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One interesting story on a founder you met while your time at SoftBank and decided that you need to put the weight of SoftBank behind the company for it to grow. Yeah. I'm sure you've met a lot of interesting founders, but you have to pick one.
I have truly been privileged to work with the most amazing founders. I'll take two because it's so hard to pick one. One is actually the first quantum computing investment from SoftBank. And the entrepreneur and the founders, the initial founders brought on a CEO. Such a strong team based both on the technical strength as well as the business acumen, which was very different from what we were seeing with the other quantum computing companies. And by the way, as part of that diligence, I wrote a very basic quantum computing program. So I have that to claim as well, is that I've written my quantum computing program as part of the diligence. And they are, like someone that I met during that whole diligence process will win the Nobel Prize one day for their work in quantum computing. And so it's very, very exciting to think about the caliber of work that they're doing and the groundbreaking impact that it's going to have across the globe. So that's one. The other founder is Ashutosh Garg, who's a founder of 𝒕𝒊𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈, and they are a talent intelligence tool. And I love that company and what it's doing. It really shifts the model of how hiring is done, how learning, growing within a company is done by putting the person in the center. And so if a company has one of their tools, it will surface roles for you that are the right match versus you going to have to do a keyword match. And it's an AI first platform. One of the consequences of their tools is that, it surfaces roles to candidates. And what we find is some of the companies were finding almost a 50% increase in diverse candidates. Why? Because there's this whole research that says that men look at a role and if they see a 60% match, they say, oh my God, I'm the next best thing to slice bread. Versus women, when they looked at a role, like, what is the stats? Do you know the stats?
Yeah. They're like, for the same role, they would think that unless I'm 99% there, I'm not good at it.
So what happens is when this tool surfaces roles for you, the person is going, really? I am a good match for this? I would have never even bothered to apply for it. So I love how AI is being used to really, when they talk about biases seeping into AI, this is an example of how AI can be used to counter the biases. And I'm just so excited about that company and what they're doing.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you shared about this. It matches so much with the theme of our show. Maybe our next guest can be those founders.
Ashutosh Garg and Peter. I will make both of those introductions. They're fabulous. When Ashutosh is visiting next, I'm sure, and Peter, I'm sure, would be coming
definitely.
as well.
And one last story around a boardroom dilemma that you faced.
Let me actually take Stanford Business School. And one of the big top 3 to 5 agenda items for the dean is, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my last board meeting before I stepped down, actually, the whole focus was how far we have come. And it was extraordinarily exciting to hear him say, today, as I look around the classroom, it almost feels like I'm talking to the UN, given the diversity. We had a panel of diversity leads volunteers come talk. And what was fascinating was the more the diversity, they were also raising new challenges on the inclusion front. So if you have a bunch of first-gen college students, they had very different needs and challenges versus people who were several generations in. Or like what happens if there's someone who comes from a country where homosexuality is almost offensive in their religion, and how is it that they address that within themselves, and how is it that society can do to support you? So just thinking then about, fine, we fixed diversity, what is it that we need to do to really up the bar on inclusion, equity, belonging? As they say, diversity is about being invited to the dance floor. Equity is about, are you dancing? And inclusion is, are you dancing? And equity is, are you dancing the way you want to? And belonging is, are you all having a great time while doing it? So the stark contrast of progress on one, unearthing a whole new set of issues, and something that the board is ultra focused on. And I'm just so grateful for their leadership, and truly taking a leadership role through all of the different crises that the United States in particular has gone through.
Yeah, we want to see a women dean also now.
All right.
In the Ivy Leagues, I don't know if they have.
I know Wharton has, University of Pennsylvania, actually as part of the Athena SPAC. Judith Rodin is on the board of the Athena SPAC. Okay. She was the first female president of any Ivy League University of Pennsylvania, first female president of Rockefeller Foundation. Okay. And again, it's been an extraordinary privilege to learn from her. And she's part of my board, and she pushes us hard on the things that we need to.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned her name, because at least people know that someone is there. Because the general norm is that they think that, okay, there is no women on such boards or such high-level positions like deans.
If you do a Zoom session, we'll have Judith Rodin do a session with you as well.
Yeah, we can do that.
Let's do it.
That'll be amazing. But lastly,
amazing.
Lastly, what's the last thing that you did for the first time?
I was in Hyderabad, and my best friend from high school was there. We have this WhatsApp group called Fab 5. And we did a reel, and we danced to, what is this? Desi Daru song. So we will be posting it soon. So there you go. All right.
We'll check it out.
Okay.
But on that fun note.
And so, by the way, the lyrics go, my friendship is like Indian drink, so she thought it was very appropriate for friendship. So, so that I don't just stop at the Desi Daru part of it. It was about friendship and
I know. It's important to over-communicate.
I know.
But thanks a lot, Kirthiga, for sharing all these stories so patiently with me, and being a part of the conversation as if you were remembering all your memories, as if you're watching your photo album of each phase of your life. I really enjoyed hearing to it.
No, thank you for your probing questions that made me go into different parts of my journey. And I think the best is yet to come.
Yes.
So, and I look forward to every bit
Thank
of it.
You so much.
Thank you.